Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the Thailand market briefing and cultural awareness. Great to see so many of you on the webinar, and we're going to take a deep dive today into the wine market in Thailand, as well as take a closer look at the cultural aspects of doing business there. But before we begin, let's acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land.
We acknowledge the lands of the traditional custodians across Australia. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' continuing connection to land, water and sky country. We acknowledge the wine regions and hundreds of different nations around this continent and the ancient soils on which we stand and grow. From the Wadani saltwater peoples of the Margaret River in our west to the East Coast Sunrise people of the Yuin Nation and the Southern Island and Saltbush peoples of the Nioni peoples of Tasmania. Today and always, we pay our deep respects to the custodians, those who went before and those who will follow, as the knowledge holders of tomorrow. This is Australia.
I'd also like to acknowledge that we are coming to you today from the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pay my respects to elders past and present. And we also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations people. Good afternoon, I'm Fran Baxter, Executive Director of Value Learning. Before we get into the content for today, I'll just take you through a little housekeeping. At the right of your screen, you'll find a chat and Q&A function. To join the conversation, you can post directly into the chat. To ask a question, simply click and add to the Q&A at the button on your right. We have experts today joining us from Austrade and from my organisation Value Learning, who will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible, time permitting. Any questions that aren't answered on the day, though, will be followed up and we'll send the information to you after the session. A recording of today's webinar will also be emailed to all attendees tomorrow. Lastly, if you're having any technical issues, we recommend that you refresh your URL or browser or pop a question into the chat. So I'd like to first introduce Austrade. I'd like to introduce Michael Hellerman, Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for of the market.
Thank you very much, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and speak with you all from Bangkok. So as you just heard, I am the head of Austrade's team in Thailand, and we have a team of about 15 business development managers here in Bangkok, covering a whole range of sectors for Australian exporters. And our agribusiness team, which includes our wine promotion efforts, is our biggest team in terms of both client flow and typically in terms of the value it generates in exports. So it's my pleasure to give you a bit of an overview first of the Thai market and Thai economy, and then to drill down a little into some of our observations of the wine market here in Thailand. So next slide, please. So sort of starting at a macro trading level and then zooming down, if you think about Australia's broad interest in the Thai market and the region in which it sits, you can see on that slide that Thailand is a very substantial trading relationship. That's about $20 billion a year in merchandise or goods imports and exports. So that's excluding services. And that slide contextualizes our top global trading partners. And as you can see, Thailand, for example, is as substantial a trading relationship as the United Kingdom. So while it is in some cases a less high profile market than you might imagine, the actual substance of the trading relationship is very, very significant across a whole range of sectors. Next slide, please. So this is our kind of high level Thailand by the numbers slide. And starting with the absolute basics, you have about 70 million people in Thailand. So it's a very substantially sized country. GDP per capita, which is an important measure in thinking about what a market can afford in terms of an Australian premium wine, is over 10,000 Australian dollars. So, and there are pockets of Thailand where you see very, very concentrated levels of wealth, including in Greater Bangkok. And that level of wealth does support the spending power that you need to purchase a premium Australian wine, particularly in this market where there are a lot of additional costs for a Thai consumer that are not generated by you, the grower and producer. Thinking about how Thailand's economy has broadly performed, if you look over on the bottom right of that slide, you'll see that prior to COVID, 40 million tourists came to Thailand in 2019. So by global standards, that's an incredibly high number. And obviously this is a key potential consumer class for Australian wine in this market. By 2020, with Thailand closing its borders in a very similar way to what Australia did, that number dropped to 6 million. And by 2021, you'd seen tourism numbers drop even further. So given that you saw about perhaps up to 20% of Thailand's GDP disappear with the pandemic in the short term, of course, not in the long term. But at the same time, Thailand, like many big exporting economies, had an export-driven boom in everything from personal protective equipment during the pandemic through to its very big automotive sector. And that took up some of the slack in the Thai economy. So you've had this kind of dual challenge of a huge amount of international money disappearing out of the visitor economy here, and other parts of the Thai economy performing absolutely exceptionally. But in and amongst all that, you still saw probably about a 6% economic contraction in 2020, with growth beginning to return after that. And I'll show you some growth figures later on. Just other kind of headline numbers here, though. Thailand is actually a very substantial investor in Australia, including in sectors that you might not guess. A very large Thai sugar business has a $500 million investment in far north Queensland in the sugar industry. Like most of Southeast Asia, it's intensely digitally connected. My broadband speed in my apartment in Bangkok is 4 times faster than my NBN connection was in Sydney prior to coming here. Astonishingly, many Thais have 2 or more mobile phones. We joke in the office about people carrying burners, but it's quite common for people to have a work phone and a personal phone, reflecting very, very strong digital architecture. And just in terms of Thailand's consuming class and position, it is located very centrally in terms of where growth is happening across the region. And the last number I'd highlight there in the context of Australian wine businesses is that you've got a large group of Thai alumni from Australian universities who returned to Thailand, and they're a market that have experienced your products in Australia and bring some knowledge of our wine sector back to Thailand. They're also people who could afford what is frankly an astonishingly expensive 3 or 4 years as a student in Australia. So they've got the buying power we need to sell high quality Australian wines. Next slide, please. So in terms of overall trends we're seeing in the market, the first is, even despite the challenges of COVID, we've seen what you might call the consuming class hold up incredibly well for a whole variety of Australian premium products, including things like Australian beef and salmon that are obviously very well complemented by a glass of Australian wine. In the broader economy, Thailand, like many sort of upper middle income type economies, is attempting to sort of raise productivity and push its workforce up into higher skilled settings. Of course, many countries face this challenge. In the urban environment, particularly in big cities like Bangkok, the cost of land and the level of wealth drives pretty incredible high-end technology solutions, in the way that if you think of a premium development in Australia, like say Barangaroo in Sydney, you see a lot of development of that sophistication, cost and scale here in Bangkok. Now, thankfully, the impact of the pandemic is beginning to recede here, although, as I said, there is some scarring. And excuse me, very positively, we've seen in an Australian context a near or a dramatic increase in the number of direct flights between Australia and Thailand as borders have reopened in both countries. Here in Thailand, from 1 May, you saw the last remaining, it was a sort of 24-hour quarantine period with a PCR test removed. So for an Australian looking to come and do business or visit Thailand, there are now no entry restrictions, which is very positive. And I'd broadly characterize life in Bangkok as very normal, with a strict mask mandate. So if you're in Bangkok, you'll see masks everywhere. But aside from masks, life has pretty much returned to normal. It's not dissimilar to what you'd be seeing in Australian cities. Next slide, please. So just, I guess, a context slide on that economic performance that I was talking about before. You can see in 2020 that severe hit to Thailand's economic growth, but you can see from 2021 onwards growth starting to return. And in the context of a gradual return of tourists at scale, sort of almost 4% growth is a strong number for Thailand. Next slide, please. So thinking about what the wine market looks like here from an Australian perspective. So we are the number one ranked wine import. From a Thai perspective, imports of Australian wine places us as the number one market, followed by France. And in the context of our free trading arrangements through the Thailand-Australia Free Trade Agreement, we do enjoy a competitive advantage against virtually all of our New World and Old World wine competitors. And interestingly, if you look at that chart, you can see that while quantity has dropped over the last 4 years, value has increased, which from our perspective is a very positive trend in the context of our positioning in market, which won't be an unfamiliar story to you, but we are looking, I think, as a sector, to continue to educate the market and get to the point, which we're not at yet, where Australia is perceived as the best wine quality destination in the world, and can outcompete particularly France in, what we might loosely call the prestige stakes in this market. So, trends that you've seen in many Asian markets where perhaps very wealthy buyers, but who are, let's say, in the maturing stage of their palate and appreciation for international wine, will often default to an inexpensive French brand for reasons of social prestige in serving that wine. Of course, this is a familiar story in many emerging wine markets, but sitting alongside that, I think, is very much an appreciation in the Thai market of both the quality and value of Australian wine, and our national wine brand, really, all things considered, is exceptionally strong. Next slide, please. So when we look at grapes and blends in the market, it's, as you can see there, dominated by reds, and something that I've reflected on personally and had conversations with a variety of internationally educated Thai sommeliers, and also there's a strong international cohort of sommeliers across Thailand's premium hotels in particular. I've always found it very interesting in this market that Chardonnay is the white that performs most strongly. If you think about an Australian palate, I'm always very nervous with an audience of this level of sophistication talking about what the Australian palate is, but you might expect in one of the hottest cities in the world to see more Riesling or more Sauv Blanc in those varieties. But, the Thai market is just not quite there yet in terms of the development of its palate, particularly for drier whites. And I think that is a long-term opportunity in the market, but one that will take time. And of course, that's not to say that Australia doesn't produce superb Chardonnays, which are finding a strong market here in Thailand. Next slide, please. I think we're almost there. So I just wanted to finish with something a little visual before we go to any Q&A. So when we think about how Thai consumers perceive wine and its pricing in this market, so you can see there at below Australian $30, which is roughly 600 Thai baht. In that segment, we're dominating the market. In mid-range, we're still performing strongly as well. But as I alluded to earlier, I think for reasons that are well known to you all, in the 1500 Thai baht, so roughly 70-75 Australian segment, you still see a preference for French wine in that segment. And if you just look at that little display in the photo, I find it interesting the way wines have been characterized: Old World Red, New World. You can see bottles are often grouped and marketed by nationality in this market. And I think the other thing that I just sort of wanted to finish on saying is some of you will be aware that there are, I guess, a couple of challenges, even though we enjoy a strong market position, that are specific to this market. One is that virtually any form of marketing or advertising of wine is prohibited under under Thai rules. So that's why, one of the default mechanisms, particularly with the pandemic, hopefully having come to a close, that we use to market wine is through events with small to medium-sized groups, because typical social media marketing or advertising is largely banned in this market. There is also some complexity around labeling, which adds costs. We're seeing some movement on that. So we may see a bit of liberalisation on those rules. And of course, although we enjoy a substantial tariff advantage, wine is still, taxed very, very considerably in this market. And, one of the things that myself and colleagues in the embassy, with other governments from wine producing nations, in constant conversations with Thai regulators about, is thinking about the potential advantages for Thailand as a tourism destination, as a destination for MICE events, if we were to see further liberalisation in the way that wine is regulated and taxed in this market. So, I think I'd sort of finish by saying there's a very strong appreciation for the quality and value of our product. You saw on that chart that value has increased over the last few years. As tourists begin to return at scale over the next, say, 2 years in Thailand, there will continue to be a lot of advocacy behind the scenes on your behalf in an effort to shift the regulatory model in our favour. But, despite those challenges, it is a market where there's real value, we think, for Australia. And I guess finally, at a basic business development level, like many markets, and it's of course no surprise, this is a market where having a strong local importer or distributor as your partner is absolutely critical to help you navigate some of that regulatory complexity that I've alluded to. So I'm going to now have a quick look at some of the questions that have come through. And one question I've got here is wine a popular corporate gift for staff? And what's an indication of the price point of the wine that's used on that occasion? So I think in international business circles, the answer is yes. And in our own work, as an Austrade office across a whole range of sectors, we will, as our sort of preferential go-to present, we will gift Australian wine, but we obviously have an ulterior motive in doing that. For Thai business, I'd say it is something that you will see, but it is not. It's certainly not as common as you'd see in international business circles. And the other thing, just in a local context, is Thailand has had a prolonged and very severe, until recently, set of restrictions in line with the pandemic, which has meant the physical opportunity to hand over gifts has actually been reduced. And if you're thinking about the value of a gift in Thailand's culture, as in many places in Asia, the context of the receiver of the gift is what matters. So if you were gifting a bottle to a senior Thai executive, I think you'd expect to want to be at 50 to 100 Australian dollars in terms of what that wine would sell for in the Thai market. Just looking through to see. So yeah, so a very, very interesting question from Mark, who I think has picked up on this climate and grape theme that I alluded to as well. So Mark has said, was in Singapore with his importer and asked why reds are so strong when it's hot. And he said, it's always hot here, so we drink reds because we're used to the heat. And he's knocked off a Shiraz with a Luxor. Now, given as anyone who's had a good laksa, including, people are on the line in Adelaide where you can get a great laksa, it's a fabulous dish if you're in Malaysia or Singapore, but it's a big, heavy dish. And I would have thought you'd pair it with a Riesling. So, I think one of the long-term opportunities in really across ASEAN, and I've worked in this market in Indonesia and Kuala Lumpur as well, is that long-term education piece. And if you think about how we fuse Australian wine with high-quality Asian food at home, that's a journey that we can take markets like Thailand on. But it is, at times, I confess, mystifying to me that you'd put a very full-bodied red with a laksa or the Thai equivalent. So yeah, very much agree with that question, Mark. Now, I might just go back to our moderators and ask if there are any other questions before I sign off.
I think that looks about it for now, Michael. But thank you so much for your valuable insights into the Thai market. I'm sure that there's been lots of things to be learnt there, both around the wine market, but also about life in Thailand. I, for one, today would be very grateful to have the better internet connection that we really are missing at times here. But look, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And if there's any further questions, we can forward them on at a later time and get a response post the session, if that's okay.
Sounds great. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. So now we've kind of gained a little more understanding of the wine landscape. I'd like to introduce my colleagues from Value Learning, and we'll start to take you through some of the realities of the cultural aspects and increasing our cultural awareness so that we really take advantage of the market that we're exposed to. So firstly, I'll introduce my colleague Marcella. So her and I are both directors at Value Learning. We're an intercultural specialist organisation, and this is the third of our cultural snapshots for Wine Australia, after previously looking at Indonesia and then Taiwan. Some of you may have been on those calls as well, and I understand that the recordings are available on the Wine Australia site. And today we're introducing our cultural informant, the person that really understands the Thai culture, and that's Chania Allen. And Chania is an intercultural specialist as well, really focusing on across the Asian environment, but comes from Thailand and brings great insights into intercultural communication and cultural awareness that's going to really set us up well for doing business in Thailand. So just a few things that we're planning to do today. We're going to introduce a broad concept around intercultural competence and culture and how that can impact and what kind of skills may be needed to interact in this global environment. Identify and find ways to navigate cultural differences and doing business, and then discuss really quite specific areas of Thai values and how to be effective in that context and the impact of those values on how business is done in Thailand. We think all these things will really help you to maximise your exposure in their market and avoid some unnecessary errors, but also increase your likelihood of success.
And I'm just thinking, Mark is saying that he's got good internet. Well, we are all praying to the internet gods. We haven't had a good internet day. So, and I can see if Chania is there, I think she should introduce this concept of Thailand being sabai, because we might need it during this session. Chania, are you there?
I'll hand over to Chania.
She's just here. Oops. We might come back to this. If Chania, if you can turn on your camera and microphone. Okay, she can't hear anything. That's okay. Look, we'll get back once Chania. Oh, there she is. Can you hear us, Chania? Oops. There you are. Can you hear me? No, she can't. That's okay. Let me get started. We'll get back to this concept of sabai that Chania can explain better. But it's this concept that everything is easygoing and relaxed in Thailand. So, and it has to be joyful as well. So I think we're going to try to have a bit of that approach in the next hour or so, about easygoing, casual, to go about this. So, but let's talk about culture first. We want to introduce something very general to kind of get our head on why culture is important. First of all, what is culture? And it's important culture is learned and shared patterns of beliefs and behaviors of a group of people that are passed generation from one generation to the other. And there's two very important things here. It's learned and it's shared. So we're not born with culture, and it needs more than one person to call it a culture. But it's basically, it doesn't mean that everyone does the same thing, and that's something important to keep in mind. Not that every single person from a culture behaves the same way, but that there is certain behaviors and values that are acceptable, that are being seen as being the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. So we're going to dive a bit deeper on what does that look like in Thai culture. Yes, so Chani, are you there? Are you good? I'll keep going. And we like to think of culture as the idea of an iceberg, where you can only see 10% of the iceberg of culture, which is usually, you know, the food, the dress, the festival. And then there is 90% of the culture that we can't see, which is underneath the waterline. And it has to do with the way people communicate, the way people approach conflict, how do decisions are made in groups, how is the power distributed, the concept of time, the concept of beauty, and many other things. And these are the values that takes a bit longer to discover and to unfold, but that directly influence behavior. And in this case, it's important to understand because influence wine consumption, for example, what type of wine people will drink and why and how and when and who with, right? So the behavior of just drinking wine or buying wine or gifting wine is influenced by these behaviors. The same as if you're doing business there, right? We always say that it's very important to have self-awareness first. So when we go and do business, we go with a style. And the Australian style or the Australian culture of doing business looks a bit like this. It's a very general iceberg, but you know, Australians tend to be more egalitarian, transparent. They're rule compliant. The communication is usually very polite but direct, very casual, and the communication is also low context. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. But it's this idea that everything is in the words. Everything that needs to be said is said or written, and it's spelled out for everyone to be on the same page. So, and this is the Australian style. Now, why is it important? Because when you go to Thailand or to any other different culture to do business, you'll go with this style, and your expectation will be of others behaving this way. But we don't see things the way they are, but the way we are, right? So. And that can be a clash there, and there is some things to explore. So the more self-awareness you have about how you like doing business, the more successful you're going to be in the context you're going into. In this case, in Thailand, right? Good. How are we going there? Are we able to bring Tanya back? Because we want to dive under the Thai iceberg. So we had a look at the Australian iceberg and how business works for us, but what does it look like in Thailand and what are the differences and similarities? Okay. Okay, I can get we had the plan B, so we have a recording of the next part that I can play. Should I get on to that? Should we go for that? I think we will. Okay, let's just stop sharing my screen. Hi, Tanya, are you there? Can you hear me? That's okay. Can you say something? See if we can hear you.
Yes, hi. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you want me to get the slides back?
I actually cannot access that page. I cannot see the slide, but I can hear you.
Okay, how about we start and I can tell you what slide we're on.
Sure, let's do that.
Let's do that. Okay, let me just get back then to the presentation. But I was just saying, let's dive under the Thai iceberg. Let's have a look at the Thai iceberg. And
Okay.
now we have the slide with the iceberg if you want to talk about it.
Okay, so if we look at the iceberg model across cultures, you will see that there are all differences, right? Now, what I wanted to point out is that is a concept that is called low context and high context culture, which Thailand, similar to many Asian countries, we belong into the high context part, which means that there are a lot of complex system at work underneath. So if you look above the water, the iceberg tip that you're seeing right now is very surface, right? You see all kinds of festival, different regional dialect, the language, clothing. You also see people smiling a lot and nodding along with whatever you say. However, how can you be sure that that nod means yes? That nod means I understand, or that nod is basically saying, oh, I am being very polite, thank you. So underneath the Thai iceberg, you will see that we have a system of hierarchy. We have a different communication style. We are very indirect. So we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Now, the goal here is just for you to be aware of the differences, okay? It doesn't require you to understand everything or remember everything. We're just going to talk about the behavior, the preference, why the nonverbal is this way and that way, and how to help you communicate a little better or feel a little more comfortable with the different cultural values here.
Fantastic. And we do have like the comparison of the two icebergs, which I think is very important to see side to side, to just point out some of the things that we were talking about. Fran?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting when we see the iceberg side by side. You can see the real differences. So, for instance, the hierarchical structure, which is really common in Thailand compared to a more egalitarian, even structure that we really ascribe to here in Australia. The concepts of transparency, again, something that we're not going to see so evident in the Thai iceberg. And then that idea of the importance of harmony, the direct and indirect types of communication, the differences across the two countries. When we're going to go into some more of these elements around Thailand as we go through, but it's just important for now to increase our self-awareness of how we operate within the Australian system and how different that might be to operating in Thailand.
And I'm seeing that Will Lin says he's from Vietnam. No, I don't know if he or she, but from Vietnam. And yes, indirect style is confusing. We'll talk about that a bit later. And Tanya, can I ask you to go back to this concept of sabai, that, yeah, I just show this little GIF. Oh, where is my GIF? Here. So can you tell us what this means?
So sabai is the concept of easygoing, being joyful. And this will be explained a little further in the details. But just to introduce you that in Thai way, pretty much we are not very serious. We are not very strict in terms of you know, having fun. And having fun is actually very important in Thai society.
Fantastic. Good. So let me go back now because you have an acronym. Tell us about SOTUS.
So SOTUS is a social system. It's the core cultural value that I would like to introduce. This has been cultivated in Thai people's mind since we were very young. When I was in college, this concept was introduced at a freshman reception, and we became more clear of, oh, that's what it was when I was growing up, why it is this way or that way. So let's start with the first S. S of the SOTUS is seniority. Seniority in this case is basically a system of hierarchy. The most important thing you need to figure out when you meet a Thai person is how old they are. Age is the key. So if you are older, you are prioritized over the other people in terms of your wisdom, your experience. If you are a top boss in a company, you have a work seniority that you basically command respect. If you have a high social status, like the monk or the king, of course, you are going to be treated with much more respect per se, and you might be the first to be seated. It implies who is to be served the food first, who is to be served the wine first, who never pour the wine themselves, and also if it's in a public speaking or in a meeting, this person may be the last to make a speech because he's the most important.
And that's interesting because that's the connection in the iceberg. So underneath the iceberg, hierarchy and seniority is one of the values, and that influences behavior. So who gets served first, who gets to speak last, who gets some benefits. That's very important to keep that in mind. Next, the O is for...
Yeah, before we go to order, I just want to add also that it reflects in the language that we use with different people. It has the ending word when we say the whole sentence, and we have basically more than 20 I. When the Western, when you speak English, you say the word I. We have about 20 different ways to say I based on social statuses and relationship. So on to the next one, order. The order stands for the structured governing or the disciplining of the Thai society. It talks a lot about rules and compliance, which means that, according to the seniority, to keep that system going, you need to keep people in line, basically. The third one, the T, stands for tradition, which basically means the customs. So every society have a custom, right? In this picture, for example, is from a festival called Floating Festival. Beautiful nighttime celebration to worship the water god, Jomek Kongka. Kongka is her name. Another excellent example of a custom that we do every year is a Thai New Year. You may have seen the picture from the beginning when people playing water. We call it a water festival also. So Songkran is basically a blessing ceremony. It's the custom where the younger people would pay respect to the senior in a family. So you go visit them. Songkran is in April, so it's an annual, in comparison, like a Thanksgiving in the US. So you go gathering as a family, paying respect, and the older people give you blessings. So that's the tradition part. The fourth one, the U stands for unity.
Wait. We have the Sawadi before the unity?
Oh, I forgot. Thank you for reminding me. Sawadi is the way of greeting. You see the gesture, the palm to palm together like this. It symbolizes a lotus. See, the lotus is what we consider a symbol of respect. And the deeper you bow with this, the more respect you pay. So if I'm older, I'm simply holding my hands up. If I'm a younger person, I bow deeper to show my respect. And that's the rule, the hidden rule of paying respect to the seniority is our custom of greeting, is showing our collective culture of, being sabai, being respectful, being polite together.
And Tanya, would you say this is the safest way to greet when you're in Thailand? When in doubt, just bow instead of
If you do not
trying to
remember
shake
this
hands
word,
or anything else?
yeah, don't panic if you do not remember this word. Remember this gesture. This gesture actually means have four meanings. The first is hello. Second is goodbye. The third is thank you. And the last is I'm sorry. So very, very useful gesture. So just keep in mind and maybe practice this as hello and bye. Just be safe and do this with a little bow when you meet someone for the first time.
Perfect. Good. Then now is the you.
All right. The you is collective culture. It means that in Thai culture, we are very group focused. We are all about team. So we are very group oriented in many, many ways. So for example, when I was in college, we don't study alone. We always study as a group. You don't eat alone. You always eat with a group. People don't take the meal and sit in front of TV and eat alone. We eat together. We eat the meal as a family, as a group of friends, as a team at work. So it's about bonding. It's about relationship. And it's not at all focusing on individual needs or individual goal. It's always the group's consensus. So last but not
when
least
in doubt,
is the last
again. So when in doubt, do as the group is doing.
Yeah, when in Rome, go with the flow. It's the safest way.
Good.
Follow the
And
group.
then the final S.
The final S stands for spirits in terms of a display of loyalty. We can call it social responsibility also. It's an action word. So unity is a concept to keep the harmony, right? The spirit is showing by doing your role. If you have responsibilities in a family as an oldest sibling, you have different role. If you are a female of the family, if you are a daughter, you actually have different responsibilities. For example, cooking. It's very gender specific role. If you're in organization, what role do you play? So you do your role well, then that is to keep the harmony within the collective culture and to keep on the traditions and keep the order, following all the rules, respect the seniority, all together in ultimately social level. You are doing everything for the group, for the greater good. It's all one and one for everyone.
Good. So it's interesting, Chania, because it's like how it's connected the seniority and the order into the unity and the social responsibility. So everyone has a role to play in this structure, in this order. And depending on your gender, your age, your social status, what your role to play is. But at the end of the day, the most important role is to keep the unity, right? You're a representative of your group and your family, and that's why harmony is important, right? And I guess one of the things that we had in the iceberg was the non-confrontational. Yes. When Thai people have a conflict, it wouldn't be a confrontational way of solving the problem, because that could harm the unity and the group, right?
So this reflects in two ways. One is in leadership style, and the second one is a troubleshooting. As you just mentioned, the conflict mediation. We never do a direct communication in terms of solving any conflict. You always have a middle person. It's very confrontational avoidance culture. So one of the things I want to mention is avoid explicit no. So there are ways to use implicit words, like, oh, maybe. That is not just being polite, that's being respectful. Sometimes being very direct in a Western way, like when I work with American clients, they're very, very direct, very explicit with everything, which in their worldview, from that perspective, that's being respectful. But being in Asian culture, that could be viewed as being too blunt or too aggressive. So it is just a very softer way of doing things in high context culture like Thailand.
Fantastic. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But tell us a bit about this concept of Sanuk.
This is my favorite because whenever there are festivals around the world, Thai people want to join and celebrate. We are about 90 something percent Buddhist, but we celebrate the Christmas because we love to be joyful. We appreciate the festivities. We have the biggest Christmas tree at the mall every year. And it was even on a CNN news one time. I noticed and I was like, oh, wow, nice. Very sanuk, very fun. So this is pretty much an attitude of playfulness. We Thais believe in being joyful, believing in a fun way of living. And fun way is not about just, drinking or all those kind of things. Fun in this way means like peaceful, enjoyable way.
Fantastic. And I guess if you're enjoying life, time becomes a bit of a particular interesting concept to keep in mind, right?
Absolutely. So when you're being peaceful and joyful, very slow paced. We are not a quick paced society. We are very process focused. So if I get to know you, Marcella, I would want to build my relationship, my working relationship with you. I might ask, where are you from? How's your family? Do you have kids? So it's very relationship based. You focus on building that first. So it's a very slow pace even in business setting. We are super flexible. So we are tolerant of people being late. And you hear a lot of this at every meeting. Oh, I run late. I'm so sorry. Oh, it's traffic. It's okay. Sabai. So everything is easy.
So what is considered late? If you set up a meeting for 2 p.m.
That is a very interesting question. Hopefully, and I hope this is still true, is more people are getting exposed to Western cultures, or even within Asian cultures. I just stay a little more focused. If we deal with Japanese, for example, they're super punctual. So if you deal in business, you know not to be super late. But if you are, between friends, if I say, hey, Marcella, let's meet at noon, and I came at 12:15, you're probably not going to be mad at me because it's only 15 minutes. But if it's like an hour and I don't let you know, I don't think that's okay. It's a very universal concept of like, what is too late, right? But when I used to be younger, an hour is not considered late in Thai culture. If I say to my friend, oh, let's meet for lunch, and it was traffic or whatever, I'm late, I'm like an hour, sorry. And they said, okay, sabai, never mind, ไม่เป็นไร.
So for us, for Australian exporters and Australians doing business with Thailand, they have to be ready for that, right? Again, the iceberg,
Be
right?
ready.
The Australian iceberg is especially doing business. Although Australians can have an easygoing approach and are known for being easygoing, a meeting at 2 p.m. is a meeting at 2 p.m. So you are there a few minutes early to start the meeting. So, but what is very important then is having this flexibility and tolerance to this concept of time being more flexible than what it is in Australia, right?
Good. And if you have been to Asia, the traffic is horrible, especially in Bangkok. So
it's the best excuse ever.
It's yes.
Good, fantastic. And so I think we should move on to communication style, because you've been mentioning that a lot. We'll mention about this indirect communication in Vietnam, which is similar to Thailand. So tell us a bit what the communication style is like in Thailand.
So with the goal of keeping the harmony or the unity, we trying to be polite. So this emphasis on politeness sometimes overrule everything else. And our belief that being respectful is not being blunt, it just kind of trying to infer things a lot. So it's always very indirect. So if I want to say no to an invite to a party, I might say, well, maybe, let me see, let me look at my calendar, I'll get back to you later. So that's kind of a very polite, indirect way. And it's very high context also of who's asking me. Because if the boss asking, I really would not say no, right? So there are lots to be considered. But because of the relationship-oriented nature, I would likely not say no. So there are a lot of potential and go along with the group.
So again, I think, let's just talk a little bit more about what high context means, because I think it's, I mean, we are very familiar with that word, but not everyone is. But is it certain cultures are more high context and some cultures are more low context communicators. So Thailand is a high context, they prefer high context communication, while Australia is very low context. So high context is that type of communication where the listener needs to read between the lines. I'm getting an echo. Is that just me? So it's the listener who needs to read between the lines, right? So just to figure it out. And the meaning is inferred. So there is a strong focus on the nonverbal tone. And I think that's very interesting what Tanya was saying about Thailand being the land of smiles and the nodding and the and the smile. But that can mean many things. And that's why it's important that we pay attention. Yeah, we could pay attention to that, because while a nodding might mean yes in Australia or in other contexts, in Australia might not, because you need to read between the lines. What else is happening? Look around the context, right? What's the relationship between the person nodding and you? Do you have more power than that person? Because we know hierarchy plays a role. Also, relationship plays a role. Are we trying to keep harmony? And that's like, that trumps everything, right? So we will just say yes to keep harmony and the relationship, or is there anything else? And usually people who are high context communicators are very comfortable with silence, right? They don't need to fill in every gap. They're very relaxed. Yes, Tanya.
Right. Like I can be quiet for like a minute or 5 minutes and just listen to you. And that is my showing of respect, my showing of not just politeness, but I care about you. I want to listen to you. So the silence is actually not bad. You don't need to fill in. You don't need to go saying something or having to say. The other thing I want to point out is not all Asians are the same either. I learned from my Korean friend, a colleague, that they'll ask you 3 times with anything just to make sure. First time they ask, you're not supposed to say yes. You might want to show hesitation. It's like a little dance. It's like when you go on a date for the first time, you're kind of like playing a little coy, you know. It's their social dance. And then for Korean, if they ask you 3 times and yes, it's like an agreement, like, oh, okay, you're on the same page with me, and you really mean yes. So it's very high context that way. It's just complicated. It takes a little more time, slow pace, you know, focusing on the relationship part.
Exactly. So if you really want to know the truth, it's important to build a relationship, right? Before you can get a better sense of what's going on. Another thing that was important that I think we discussed earlier, Tanya, is eye contact, nonverbal communication. First of all, Thai people are not very touchy, right? And can you tell us more about that?
So this is what I learned across culture also, because I came from Thailand being super conservative. I don't hug, I don't chant, but I had to adjust myself. And living in the US for 30 years, I know that it's okay to shake hands. It's okay to hug. Like my Latin friends are all very huggy. But in Thailand, we do not display any affection. It's very little affection, even within the family. You might see people dating or in a relationship holding hand. But no, nothing further. With eye contact, though, it is important to address that if a Thai person talks to you and not looking at you in the eyes or not looking at you at all, it doesn't mean they don't respect you. That is actually being polite. I have a Japanese friends and many other Asian friends who won't look into my eyes. And for me, that's okay. Because I understand that's where they came from. Americans is total opposite. You have to really look them in the eyes, right? To show that you're listening, you're paying attention.
And that's very important when doing business. So if going to Thailand to do business, for Australians, looking in the eye will be a show of respect and, being effective in the conversation and assertive. But in Thailand, would be seen as being aggressive. So again, this concept of the two icebergs being very different and making sure that we adapt our behavior to be successful in that context. So if you go to Thailand, how do you communicate? Very indirect, high context. Look around at other cues. Don't just trust on the words. Look at who else is in the room. What else is the person saying? What is involved in the nonverbal communication? What is the relationship between those people? And so, number one, you have to become an expert of watching, observing. I like saying watch as a hawk, right? Because how do you know who speaks first? You need to watch. You need to be watching who is talking, who's leading the conversation, who is talking last, who's being served first, who's being served next. Interaction with different genders as well. Make sure you observe as much as possible the people you're interacting with. The second is be aware of the hierarchy all the time, right? So sometimes an email is taking a long time to be answered, or you're expecting an answer for someone in particular, but that person is not giving it to you, maybe because they have to ask the boss, maybe because it has to go through the hierarchy before it can be replied. And that can slow down things. So remember, it's slow pace. So charge yourself with some patience and knowing that you're there for the long term. You're there to build a relationship and to maintain that relationship. So the more patience you have and the more you invest in that relationship, the stronger your opportunity will be. And pay attention to your body language. Remember the greeting, bowing when someone is, more hierarchical than you, older than you, like Tanya said. Keep your distance again. Remember, the personal bubble of Thai people is a bit bigger probably than Australians, definitely bigger than the Latins. And also pay attention at other expressions of body language. Be indirect. So we like saying, avoid saying no. So even if you don't like it, don't say no. Find other ways of saying, you can always also try nodding, but you can also say maybe later, or say something else without saying no. And always make sure you have this third person. Yeah, third person, better if it's a local, better if they speak the language, so they can be your interpreter, not only in language, but in these values, in conveying the message that you would like to convey in a way that works in that context. So that's how you speak Thai. Anything else, Tanya, there on how to be a good communicator in a Thai context?
I want to mention this about a toast in Thai way. We do not have a word for cheers. So this is particularly for the wine people. We basically raise the glass and just click the glasses together, and that's how we cheers without really saying anything. And this is interesting in two different ways. One is observe who's making a toast, so that's the big. And when people cheers, watch for all the interactions, because you can observe a lot while drinking, because that's the way we socialize. Oh, and most important is the person with the higher rank never pour the wine themselves. So it's a little practice for you to do that observation.
The boss never pours the wine themselves. Someone else does it for them. So again, you have to be watching who pours the wine for who. Perfect. Good.
Yeah, and
again, there's a structure and an order and a hierarchy of how things happen.
Right, and I think it's a universal rule of when you
oops. Did I lose you? Okay, I think I lost Chania, but I'm still on, right? Yes? Okay, I'll keep going then. So a few more tips for success in Thailand to kind of wrap this up. First of all, keep in mind everything that Chania said about Sabai and Sanuk. Have a positive approach. So always go with a positive approach. A smile will go a long way in this context in particular. Take your time to build relationships. They don't get built in a day. Take your time, invest in that relationship, share your stories, you're saying, share by your family, share by your background, and hone your observation skills. So who is pouring the wine to who? What are the others in the office doing? What are the other people in the business doing? And when in doubt, always follow the group. Always follow the group. And follow the group also with this joyful attitude, in the sense that life is to be celebrated, and Chania will tell you this. People will spend time in karaoke, they will spend time having dinner, they will spend time socializing, and that's something you must do. You must join in the fun with them to be able to build that relationship, to be perceived as someone who wants to be part and wants to be in the long-term relationship with them in business, right? The long business relationship. Oh, good, Chania, you came back. Again, always consider power dynamics and be flexible with time. Be ready to things not to be as quick as you would like, and things to not happen at the time you expect them to happen. And keep in mind these things. Keep in mind how we like doing business, but also how Thai people like doing business. So try to build that bridge. Good. So Chania is inviting you, if you're in Thailand, in the next few months, contact Chania as well. She can give you some more tips on what to do. So I think we will wrap it up here and we'll open up for questions. We have a little video to show you just before, but while you prepare your questions, start getting them ready in the chat. We have a video from some Australian wine exporters who have experience in this market, and they share some tips with us. So let's play this video and then come back.
That's probably the most important thing in terms of being able to communicate. Like, we might not always get each other's exact nuance.
Chania, you need to mute yourself. Here we go.
And so you have to be careful that you don't misinterpret something. And I think that's why it's always really important, if someone, when you're writing something or when you're speaking, that you try really hard to really listen very actively and repeat back, what you think they're saying, so that you make sure that you're both understanding the same thing. Because particularly if someone is English is a second or third or fourth language, it's really important to make sure that the nuances are understood.
Well, the first thing I'd say about Asia at large is that the number one thing you must have is patience. So when you're doing business in Asia, when you start to establish yourself wanting to do business or finding a new market in Asia at large, whether it be North Asia or Southeast Asia, the first thing you need to understand is that doing business our way and doing business the Asian way is completely different.
You know, I always try to learn a few different sayings in the local language just to show that I guess try to be a little bit more culturally aware. Just, you know, hello, how are you? You know, thank you, please. Just little things like that. And I think in doing business, and certainly in doing business in foreign countries, you need to imagine what it would be like for overseas visitors here in Australia and just reverse it. And I guess try and empathise a little bit more with the situation.
Stay patient, focus on the main prize, realise that the wine industry, your wine business, is a long-term business. You don't get in this wine business to build it up in 4 or 5 years and sell it off. First of all, it takes years and years for vines to mature at a level where the quality of juice that's coming off your vines you're happy about. You know, I mean, one thing you can't do is you can't buy time.
And where you want your wines sold, how you want them sold, who do you want, you know, to be drinking them, who's your customer, all of those considerations that you would have in any market are just as important in the Asian market. But the key piece, I would say, that's different to other parts of the world is that need for, you know, patience and a long-term view, because it doesn't necessarily always happen just straight away. You have to actually work at those relationships for a lot longer and take your time and get to know them and build trust together.
Well, there's no doubt for those who have experienced that patience and building trust is part of the long-term game. So if anyone has any questions, let me check the Q&A. There's nothing there. But also important to just, you know, if any of you are going to Thailand anytime soon or thinking of exporting, you can contact Tanya, and Wine Australia has her details, or through us anytime. But if anyone has any questions now. Come back, Fran.
Come back. Okay. So we've got to the end. And apologies to everyone for the very problematic.
Yeah. No, I'm just smiling because the internet gods were kind of good, but not perfect. But it looks like we have no questions.
Okay, and we had a chance to see the video.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, look, again, thank you, Chania, for providing such valuable insights into the Thai culture and the impact that can have on doing business in Thailand. I know it's really interesting when we start to make comparisons across some of the different countries. Things that can often look very similar can, in fact, have quite different implications as to, you know, from one country to the other. And so these insights for each country, I think, are really valuable. Thanks also to Marcella for the information around culture in general and the impact of our values on how we behave. I think, again, that really ties the connection together with the specifics for Thailand, but also how come? Why is this so? So excellent. Thank you for sharing that today, and thank you to the attendees for coming. Today's session has been recorded, and we will email you the link when it's live on the website. Thanks again for joining the Thai Market Briefing and Cultural Awareness, and we hope to see you next time. The next two countries that are on the list will be Vietnam, followed by Japan. So keep an eye out for information on the dates for those upcoming events. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Chania, for bringing your expertise.
Thank you, Fran, and thank you, everyone.